So a doctor, a pilot, and a banker were running through the streets of downtown Toronto. And that, my friends, is no joke. So first, a little bit of context. As much as the three of us dream about turning this band into a full-time gig, we actually have day jobs that we all really enjoy and take pretty seriously. They're a pretty big part of who we are, and they allow us the privilege to continue to pump time and energy into our passion.
While paying bills, of course.
And you know that here is ridiculous.
Anyway, with this in mind, it made sense for us to be able to show off these parts of ourselves in our art, but we just didn't know how to. That was until we met Mr. Nicholas Collier. But we'll just call him Nick from here on out. I met Nick during the last couple months of my internship at the on-campus clinic. As an ex-wrestler and powerlifter, you can imagine the size on this dude. 250 pounds of don't f*** with me energy. He was super into health and wellness, and he'd come into the clinic once every couple weeks or so, and when we saw each other, we'd have the most interesting conversations. Once I got to know him a little better, I learned that this burly giant actually had a really soft and artistic side. He was studying to become a filmmaker, and a really good one at that. He'd shown me a couple projects he'd been working on, and I was super impressed. And then one day, while we were chatting about music, art, Joe Rogan, psychedelics, all kinds of crazy shit, he turned to me and said that he'd been listening to some of our music, and he had a really good idea for a music video for Endless Summer. Well, I already knew what this guy was capable of, and Craig and Phil were scheduled to come to Toronto for our summer tour. How could I say no? I turned to him and said, "Nick, my friend, you've got yourself a deal." Fast forward to June 7th, 2019. It was a Friday, and both Craig and Phil were scheduled to land in Toronto on this day. At very different times, of course, so you can imagine my delight. But frustrations aside, my boys were coming to the big city, and we had plans with Nick and his crew to shoot a crazy concept video for Endless Summer in the short span from that very Friday evening to Sunday, just 2 days later.
Come on, Emile. You know it wouldn't be us if we didn't do this under a time crunch.
You got that right.
The concept was simple. 3 bandmates being frustrated at the mundane routine activities that their careers brought to their everyday lives, only to finally hit that climactic everything point, rush to the jam space, and have an epic jump around session with close friends and fans. The perfect feel-good story. To me, executing this story with limited resources and time restraints was the most worrisome part. But Nick had a plan. He explained that we would break the shooting into 4 main segments: the home shots, the office shots, the running shots, and the jamming shots. And if you guys know anything about me, you know your boy loves a well-organized plan. But with so much to do in so little time...
Okay, all right. We pulled it off, didn't we? Just tell the people the story.
Fine, okay. So, anyway, it's the middle of the afternoon, and Craig touches down at Pearson International. We pack up the car, and without a minute to spare, we sped off to meet Nick and the crew at the first set. Well, I call it a set to make it sound more legit. It was actually an apartment that belonged to Nick's friend, Ashraf, with a fridge full of beers and the Raptors playoffs blasting in the background. We walk into the place to be greeted by Nick, a small group of talented crew members, and of course, the legendary Ashraf, who promptly sticks a beer in each of our hands and goes...
"Move magic, baby. Let's go, Raptors, man."
Well, as you can imagine, I was fired up and ready to get to work when all of a sudden, my phone rings.
Yo, Emile. Just landed. Where you at?
Well, I hopped back in the car to go pick up the drummer and left Craig at the apartment to get all of his home shots completed. After fighting with traffic and airport parking lots...
And Philip leaving my bass guitar on the aeroplane.
They said it was at baggage claim.
We hop in the car and speed back to the city to find Craig with his pants around his ankles, finishing off his home shots.
Go watch the music video for yourselves and it will make sense.
Nick calls cut on the last shot for the day, and we cheers to the Raptors' Game 4 victory against the Warriors. Bright and early Saturday morning, we wake up to Nick and his crew blowing up our phones from street level of my apartment. We let them up and scramble to collect all of my home shots, like slamming the alarm clock, making coffee, getting dressed, and grabbing keys, knowing that later that day we'd have to repeat the exact same sequence for Phil at another residence.
Nick's house to be exact.
But the home shots were the easy part. We knew we'd have some trouble scoring locations like office buildings, a departure lounge from the airport, and a medical clinic on Saturday morning with no permits. Now, I don't know if we could get in trouble for exposing this information, but nobody was harmed in the making of this video, so to the venues that we snuck into to grab the shots, consider this our delayed thank you, and I'm sorry, I guess? First stop was the on-campus clinic that I did my internship at. We figured this would be the perfect spot to kill two birds with one stone and get our office shots as well as our clinic shots. So, the 7 of us parked out front, walked straight through the front door holding cases of camera equipment and changes of clothes, gave the weekend security guard a confident smile and a nod, and walked straight through into the deep hallways of the clinic.
No harm, no foul, right?
Don't worry, I told Nick and his crew to avoid grabbing any clips with clinic branding, and of course to be very respectful of the space. Okay, disclaimer over. We grabbed our shots in the clinic room, near the printers, and of course my awkward attempt to run through the halls as quietly as I could. Nick yelled, "Cut!" We packed up our and came out the way we came in, cool as ice. Now, if you thought that us sneaking into a closed clinic that I actually worked at was nerve-wracking, try getting inconspicuous shots in the foyer of a busy airport while your lead actor is fully decked out in a pilot uniform. With our stealth ops plan intact, we'd roll up to the drop-off point at departures, and Craig, Nick, and Brandon, one of his crew members, made their way into the lobby. I had a plan to make a scene to distract the parking guards and divert attention from the others, but Phil decided it would probably be best to just go to a nearby gas station for coffee and donuts.
With sprinkles, obviously.
I obliged, but not gonna lie, I was cold sweating. And then about 20 minutes later, I get a call from Nick in a very serious tone saying that he urgently needed us to come back to the airport because the 3 of them were in a f***ing holding cell. Well, I start to shit my pants, of course, assuming the worst, and rambling, "What happened? Are you guys okay?" And I guess they couldn't hold it in because almost immediately there was a roar of laughter on the other end of the phone as they made their way into the gas station that we were waiting at.
Got your shot, boys. On to the next one.
Assholes, man. Well, now that all the stressful parts were over, we spent the rest of the day getting some pretty cool cinematic shots of us running through some iconic spots in the city. In the storyline, these were meant to be framed as parts where we had that aha moment and left our places of work and jetted to the jam space. We got running shots in the financial district, Cherry Beach, University of Toronto, and a sweet shot on the Bathurst Bridge where we all had to run into the street to stop traffic as Craig skateboarded across the sidewalk with the Toronto skyline in the background. Nick called cut on the last shot of the day, and we went to go eat and drink our body weight in tacos and margaritas at a local Mexican joint, and cheers to another successful day of shooting. Sunday, the final day of shooting, and all we had left were the jamming shots. As I mentioned before, Nick had this idea that when the lights came on for the final chorus, we'd be playing an intimate but epic show to a raging crowd. There was only one place that we could do this that would make it look as legit as possible, and that place was called the Rehearsal Factory, a huge multi-floor building in downtown Toronto that had been converted into individual practice spaces for bands that pay by the hour to use them. Well, we put our pennies together and we were able to rent 2 rooms for 2 hours each. The first room was small. We used it just to get a couple close-up shots of us playing along throughout the song as the video flipped between these clips and shots from the storyline. The second room, on the other hand, was huge. It had stacks of amps, a stage, proper lighting, and a sectional couch and table in the corner for all of our friends to hang out by. The perfect place to shoot a fake concert. We filled the lounge area with booze that we had bought the night before to entice all of our friends to lend us their time to jump around like idiots in the name of art. So, while we left them to drink up and get loose, we finished up our shots in the small room and then finally made our way over to the stage for the grand finale. Nick was in full director mode, moving people around as he needed them, but even he was starting to feel the pressure. Time was running low on our room rental, and we had barely started shooting our final scenes. So with hardly any breaks between takes, Nick would yell, "Action!" and we'd play the final chorus as hard as we could as our friends danced around and cheered their asses off. After running this sequence through a handful of times, Nick took a peek at the final set of clips, looked up, thanked everyone for coming, and with pure joy, pride, and relief in his voice, he said, "That's a wrap, folks!" And just like that, the craziest 2.5 days of shooting were over in just one sentence. After some tipsy celebrations and a sloppy group hug, we waved goodbye to our friends and walked over to the bar across the street for one final toast. So, the next time you hear someone start a joke with, "A doctor, a pilot, and a banker were running through the streets of downtown Toronto," well, we're the joke. But you already knew that.